A very pleasant good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to your hour. This is Rita Gadi. I'm greeting you according to your time zone, wherever you're located. We get a lot of messages coming from different parts of the world, as a matter of fact, and also from different parts of the country, although we all have the same time zone here in the Philippines. We are coming into the Declaration of Independence, so many, decades, 130 plus years ago, 133 to be exact. And that was in Kawit, Cavite, by Emilio Aguinaldo, raising the flag and declaring our independence on that day. But if we ask the question, are we truly independent? What did he declare as being independent at that time? Because we were under the Americans, remember? The Americans bought us from Spain. First, they had the battle, of course, and then after that, they lost. Spain lost the battle at Manila Bay, and then we were sold. And they signed the document, which we are not a party to. This was the Treaty of Paris between the United States of America and the Republic, not yet the Republic of the Philippines, just the Philippines. We were not yet then declared as a republic. We were under American rules. So that was a time that a Declaration of Independence was announced. Isn't it ironic that it was announced at a time when we are still under the colonizing power of America? But nonetheless, that was done. So in a couple of days, in 4 days, as a matter of fact, we shall be commemorating that day of June 12, when supposedly our independence was declared. But we are declaring many things that we have to be independent from. And perhaps that is where we try to ask the idea of freedom. Freedom from what? So we first tackle what is important as far as our moving forward is concerned, because we really can't move forward unless we come to terms with what the backpack is. The backpack is the 20 years of President Marcos, the 35 years of several other presidents until President Rodrigo Roa Duterte today, the incumbent president, who will be our president until approximately about, how is this, so less than 500 days or so, when we shall be having the elections next year, 2022, in May. So there will be changes in the composition of our leadership, a new president, a new vice president, or new in the sense that they will be occupying these positions coming from wherever they are. But the names seem to be, not just seem to be, they are actually very familiar. So be that as it may, what is important now is, what is this Declaration of Independence that we are talking about? The Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino, to which we are a member of, which has also launched the Save the Nation movement, the Citizens Guard, etc., and several others, which have all zeroed in on that particular importance of what it is to be independent. Two issues that were raised by the KDP, which has been continuously discussed and talked about and detailed in many ways, and that is the manner by which we are still controlled by the oligarchs as far as our water is concerned and as far as energy is concerned, not to mention, of course, telecommunications, transportation, and several other private public services that should be undertaken by the government and not by the private sector. How this came about and what should be, how do we free ourselves from all of this? That's exactly what we're going to talk about now. It is the 8th of June. And as I've said, in 4 days, we shall be having our commemoration of an Independence Day, although at the time we were already under the American administration, until we were granted by the Americans our independence on July 4th, 1946. So during that interim period, you had what was called as the American-Philippine War, snippets of guerrilla warfare, but still a lot of collaboration. So whatever it was that was happening at the time, this is just, I don't know. It's not really for show because a lot of our Filipino soldiers were actually fighting the Americans. And in fact, the first gunshot was fired here in San Juan, in that historic bridge, a small bridge actually, which I think they have renovated now and has put a bigger marker to show that it was in that particular locality when the first shot was fired against an American, and that began the Philippine-American War. Be that as it may, that was 133 years ago. But other than that, we still had several other years that happened after which we have to come to terms and find out exactly what we have to be independent from. Two issues as far as the Marcos administration is concerned. Two issues which keep on coming back. We should declare our independence from these two issues because they repeatedly, or at least the opposition against the Marcoses and the opposition against any other government, they always raise this. One is the so-called hidden wealth, or what they call the stolen wealth of the Marcoses, and the other issue is the human rights violations also during that period of 20 years. So let's get to that issue to be free of it finally. I have repeated this so many times. In fact, I was trying to detail what was taken up during the trial in New York City against the Marcoses. That was the most comprehensive and the longest criminal case trial that was held outside of the Philippines in New York City. And that was because there were four real estate properties, prime real estate properties, that were bought by the money that came from Switzerland, allegedly, or at least proven to have come from the accounts owned by President Ferdinand E. Marcos. So that was the reason why New York City had cognizance, or they had the jurisdiction over the Marcoses, precisely because of these four real estate buildings. But other than that, there was already this arrangement that was undertaken between the government of Corazon Aquino and the United States of America by this memorandum of agreement between the Solicitor General of America, that was Victoria Tensing, and the PCGG chairman, who was at the time Jovito Salonga. So they signed an agreement which included the facts of the provisions which allowed both governments to be able to have an exchange of whatever they have against the Marcoses. There's a free exchange of documents and witnesses and testimonies or whatever else against the Marcoses. That was what they agreed upon. So because of that, uh, it was that kind of agreement that pursued this Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act that supposedly President Marcos violated. It is a law in America, and it was written by Professor Blakely, and he precisely had the historic background for that particular law, insofar as the underworld, the sleazy underworld of the drug lords, the smugglers, the prostitution dens, and all of this. They called it the mafiosi or the mafia, or however else you would call it. If you watch the movies, as far as all of these syndicates are concerned, that was exactly the background of how this professor wrote that, designed that law, and it was submitted to Congress, and it was passed by both houses of America. So that was really to target criminal syndicates, organized crime, but they used it against Ferdinand Edralin Marcos. In effect, they were alleging that the Philippine government in the 20 years of Ferdinand Marcos was a criminal syndicate, and that he stole the money of the Filipino people in those 20 years. As a matter of fact, the lady who took over his seat in Malacanang, Corazon Aquino, had the first law that she wrote under her revolutionary government, because she did not follow the Philippine Constitution at that time. She had her own, what they call the revolutionary constitution. And so, because of that, she declared by an executive order that the Marcoses stole the money of the Filipino people. In fact, that was the first executive order that she issued So you have executive order number 1, number 2, number 12, number 12A. All of that zeroing in that the Marcoses amassed great wealth which came from the Filipino people. Can you imagine that? Even though that is already an accusation which has sentenced the Marcoses and already prejudged them even before they were brought to court. So because of that executive order, it was America that had the deal with the Philippine government. And I repeat this, that deal was because, according to the last witness of the Philippine government and the United States of America, the last witness they had in the trial of New York, remember they had 95 witnesses, and the last of them was an Indian by the name of Timothy Kand. I don't know where he's coming from or what connection he has with our government or with our country, but he was presented as a witness because he claims that he was a witness to the conversations between Adnan Khashoggi, who was supposed to be his idol, and Imelda Marcos in Hawaii, and whatever it is that he witnessed, he could not testify to it because it is what you call hearsay, double hearsay. He was not participant to what was being taken up, but it just so happened he was there. And so he was brought in the trial in New York City as a last witness. When he was asked, why are you testifying here against Imelda Marcos or against the Marcoses? What is the purpose? I mean, you have to, what is the motive of this person, this Timothy Khan? Remember his name. These are public records, by the way. I am not inventing this or reciting it from just my imagination. I have practically memorized it because I was there and a participant in the legal defense of the Marcoses. So Timothy Khan, as the last witness, was asked, why are you here? Why are you testifying against the Marcoses? You know what he answered? Because according to Mrs. Aquino, no prosecution, no conviction, no basis. So yun ang connect. That is the connection. America was putting pressure on Mrs. Aquino that they will convict the Marcoses, put Mrs. Marcos in jail, and in exchange for that, she would have to extend the term of the U.S. bases here in the Philippines. That's Clark Air Force Base and the Subic Naval Base. So yun ang interest ng Amerika. So they had to use a law, an American law, so that they could have jurisdiction over the Marcoses. And that was why to be able to claim that Marcos stole the money of the Filipino, that's pretty heavy. Can you imagine the court secretary, the court secretary, I think her name is Mary. Whenever she enters the court in New York, she bangs the door with her hand and she announces, all rise. And then she's the one who presents the case. United States of America versus Imelda Marcos et al. So you can imagine if you hear that, what it means that here you have a Filipino, a former first lady of a former president, a president who has been an ally of 5 U.S. presidents being tried in the New York courthouse. Anyway, I have gone over this case a number of times. I have not really spoken about the details of this, but as I've said, we want to be free already of all these accusations. This is the independence that all of us will have to declare, not just the loyalists or those who believe in the Marcoses, but the entire Filipino nation who keep on reading and watching on television every time they feel like doing so, all about the ill-gotten wealth, the stolen wealth, the amassing of so much wealth by the Marcoses from the Filipino people. So as I've said, many times I've come with several of these statements done in the New York courthouse that is under the judge of the regional that they call it the trial court, the Southern District Trial Court. I'm sorry, I'm referring it to regional trial courts in the Philippines. But now I would like to read to you, because I was able to locate this, the testimony of Jaime C. Laya. He was the governor of the Central Bank of the Philippines during the incumbency of President Ferdinand E. Marcos. And he was brought by the United States government to New York to testify against the Marcoses. You must remember that the Marcoses did not present a single witness. In fact, they did not present any defense. They simply got whatever they had there, the notebook or the book of the prosecution against them, and that is what they used. So I'd like to read to you the question and answer testimony of Jaime Silaya, because I've already said many things about the budget of Marcos, 488 billion in 20 years. And then you compare that to all the things that he has constructed, the massive infrastructure, over 1 million kilometers of road, airports, seaports, etc. I've already listed down and spoken about this a number of times. Now I'd like to go to the exact testimony of the central bank governor of the Philippines at the New York trial, by way of emphasizing that Marcos did not steal the money of the Filipino people. In fact, he brought in money into our government. So this is perhaps one way by which we can be truly independent of all of this erroneous accusations against the Marcoses as having stolen the money of the Filipino people. And here it is. So the question raised to Laya was this. Now, you are then at this point saying to the president, look, the dollar crisis is still here. Help us by your direct intervention. That's the summary of what you said to the president, isn't it? Laya answers, yes. Question. And President Marcos responded to you, didn't he? Answer. Yes, he did. Question. Even though he was recovering from an operation? Answer. Yes. Question. And he did some things. He told you he was going to do something. And what did he tell you he was going to do? Answer. He said he was going to call someone, some friends in Europe and see what they could do. Question. And did he do that? Answer. Yes, he did. Question. And then, shortly, a very short while after President Marcos called, large sums of money began to enter or come in. Is that true? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. You don't know where that money came from, do you? Answer. Just the banks. Just the bank sources, sir. Question. Do you know what banks it came from? And do you know it came from Swiss banks? Answer. The first one was Bank of Hoffman. The second, Paribas. The third, Swiss Bank Corporation. Question. And you don't know who are the people who provided those funds, do you? Question. No, sir. Answer. No, sir. Question. Or who owned those funds? Answer. No, sir. Question. Those funds just sort of, in a way, mysteriously appeared in a very short time in your bank after the president made his call. Is that true? Answer. Well, yes, sir. The total amount was actually some $125 million. Question. So, wouldn't it be fair to say that the key by the solution of the money crisis was Ferdinand Marcos? Answer. In that sense, yes, sir. So that is the testimony of Jaime Silaya in the New York trial of Imelda Marcos. Here is very clear that when we had a dollar crisis, why did we have a dollar crisis? Well, first, after the assassination of former Senator Benigno Aquino Jr., all the big businessmen, all the rich people brought out their money. Natakot sila, nilabas ang pera. There was a dollar flight. Second, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank together held their credit against the Philippines. 148 banks. Sinara nila ang credit ng Pilipinas at sinabi, bayad muna kayo bago kami magbibigay ng pera sa Pilipinas. So we had a dollar crisis at that time. Wala nang reserves, wala nang pera, wala nang ano. And that was why the governor of the central bank, Jaime Laya, had to go to the president na, sir, we are in a dollar crisis. So yun ang nangyari. Okay. Now I will read to you these are also court records. And here we will see that, wait, I'm looking for it. Anyway, so there you have the testimony of Laya. And that was why it was important for us to read this at this time, so that directly from the records of the court, you heard exactly the testimony of Jaime Laya and the money that came in. I've already mentioned this, but I did not read the exact testimony of Jaime Laya. So now, let us be free of all of those accusing the Marcoses of having stolen the money of the people, when at the time that we had the dollar crisis and we had the money crisis because of the maneuverings and manipulation of the IMF and the World Bank, siya ang nagpasok ng pera dito. Hindi alam ni Laya kung sino, alam niya yung mga bangko na yon. And those banks also came out during the trial of New York as the source of funds that went into the purchase of the buildings. 4 na buildings na binili, galing yung funding dun sa mga bangko na yon. Wala dun yung pangalan ni Ferdinand Marcos, but we know how it is. A lot of people who make deposits in Switzerland, etc., even in Singapore, in Hong Kong, hindi nila nilalagay yung talagang pangalan lang. Meron silang either nominees, or they put it in a foundation, or they put it in a corporation. And you cannot put it in the name of a government. Bawal yan in any bank, that a government in a private bank will put in money and then you can withdraw from it. It is not allowed, especially also in Switzerland. So here is a very clear example in the testimony of Jaime Laya that you had money coming in from these Swiss banks. Minention niya yung mga Swiss banks na yon. So that today, if you go to the central bank, again, these are public records, makikita nyo, meron pang naiwan na pera doon. Out of this 125 or so million dollars, there is something like 35 million na naiwan pa, which were placements from the banks that he mentioned. And that was the time when Jobo Fernandez, appointed by Mrs. Aquino, requested the PCGG of Salonga to inquire as to what to do with those accounts. Hindi niya alam because he was not there. He was not yet the central bank governor. So he was asking Salonga, can you find out what is this? Where is this money from the Swiss accounts coming from? So what Salonga did, or PCGG, or whoever took over after Salonga, David Castro, kung sino man, dami-dami kasi nilang naupo na dyan as chairman. Well, the chairman then of PCGG wrote to the Swiss banks and asked the caller of this money. In other words, who owns this accounts na may naiwan pa na 35 million? Walang sumagot na bangko. They wrote again, walang sumagot. So 3 times nag-attempt ang PCGG to inquire from these banks, and the banks did not answer. Why were the banks not answering? Simple. President Marcos died in 1989. And the banks will only allow that movement or transfer of money by whoever is responsible for those accounts. So because the person who owns those accounts already died, hindi na makasagot ang bangko. They cannot say that we will do this, we will do that, because they have no authority whatsoever. That is common sense. It's not even a legalistic thing. It's common sense. So that money, the $35 million, is supposed to be there, still there at the central bank, not unless, since the time of Mrs. Aquino, nawala na yon. We don't know. But I'm telling you this because those are on record. Now, I will read to you from the central bank now. So ito yung testimony ni Laya. Why am I doing this? Because we have to be free and independent from all of the accusations that Marcos stole the money of the Filipino people. We have to be free of that. We have to declare our independence from that. Anyway, this is from table 14 of the central bank records. And that is why it is important now that I read it to you, just to emphasize what I have been saying all along for the past so many years. So from table 14, it is extracted from the Central Bank of the Philippines report from the Foreign Exchange Operations and Investments Department, printed and filed with the Department of Economic Research International of the Central Bank of the Philippines. So galing ito doon. So ayan, table 14. Under the column of inflow, under the heading New Foreign Investments of the Philippines, for the year 1983, there is an entry of $119 million and meron nakalagay the plus, 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 so hindi natin alam yung total amount. This means that foreign investments increased markedly during this year. Note that the previous year, the entry was for $25 million only. And then the year after, 1983, the entry was for $32 million. So nung 1983, doon pumasok yung malaking halaga after Governor Laya spoke to President Marcos, after President Marcos called some banks in Switzerland, and in a few days, in a short while, sabi nga ni Chairman Laya, sinabi nga niya na in a short while, pumasok na yung pera na yan. So I'm reading again this report from the Central Bank records. This increase of foreign investment entry, totaling $119 million, is a strange, yung strange may quotation marks, is a strange occurrence, considering the fact that during this year, again, as a result of the Aquino assassination, there was a marked increase in the flight of dollars from the country. Yeah, so that is the record there in the central bank. Now, this is the question that was brought in the trial in New York. Would foreign investors be suddenly investing into the Philippines at this time, knowing that local businesses have themselves been taking their money out because of the anxieties within the business community as a result of the Aquino assassination? So there you have it. These are from the records of the central bank. So it is very clear from there that other than the fact that there is no single document from the Philippine budget, the National Treasury, not a single document that would show that there is money taken there and brought to the pocket of Ferdinand Marcos. In fact, I keep on quoting what one of the justices in the Court of Appeals in Los Angeles said, that if, for instance, Marcos at gunpoint went to the central bank or to the budget office of the Philippine government and got the money of the Filipino people and then kept the money under his mattress and then one day brings it out, and that money he buys 4 real estate properties in New York. If that happened, then we can say that he stole the money of the Filipino people. But what was presented in the Court of Appeals of Los Angeles was newspaper documents only, newspaper reports rather, alleging that Marcos stole the money of the Filipinos. The same thing that they keep on repeating now in the same newspapers and by the same writers perhaps even, or the children of these writers or whatever. And that is what we have to declare our independence from exactly. Kaya sinasabi ko nga, if we are to declare our independence, we have to declare that because that is that part of the past which really, destroys the not just the credibility of the past government, but what that government of Marcos has instituted and established and done for our country. That is the kind of independence where tama na yung pagbibigay ng paratang na nagdakaw. Sapagkat sa dinami ng kanyang nagawa, yun ang talagang naging, that became the foundation of many of our programs of government at the time. 35 years after that, I will go through that again, what has happened to all the things that were already established at the time. Now, the second issue from which we have to be independent from, sabi ko, dalawang issue lang yan nung panahon ni Ferdinand Marcos, and that is still are the accusation of stolen wealth, and second, the accusation of the human rights violation. Now, here we go. The original human rights claimants. I will read their names so that you could see exactly where they are and what has been done regarding this. So these are the original cases. Trajano versus Ferdinand Marcos, Aimee Marcos Manotoc, and General Fabian Ver in the U.S. District Court of Honolulu under Judge Harold Fong. Sison, Jose Maria Sison versus Ferdinand Marcos and General Ver in the U.S. District Court of Honolulu. This is under CV 86225 under Judge Harold Fong. Then you have Hilao versus Ferdinand Marcos and General Ver in the U.S. District Court of Honolulu, CV 8639, also under Judge Harold Fong. And then you have Ortigas versus Ferdinand Marcos in the U.S. District Court of San Francisco, CV 861449, Judge Spencer Williams. Yan. So here you have Jose Maria Sison, Hilao, Trajano. All of these cases were before Judge Harold Fong in Hawaii, in Honolulu. Okay. So what happened was Judge William in San Francisco, together with Judge Harold Fong, dismissed these 4 original cases, dismissed them. And this is what they said. The plaintiffs in all of the above cases, lahat sila nag-appeal. After the dismissal, nag-appeal sila sa Court of Appeals ng 9th District Court ng Los Angeles. I have quoted several of the judgment there. So, yun sa court ni Judge Harold Fong and kay Spencer, they dismissed these cases. Anong kanilang dahilan? Ang sinasabi nila, under the United States Torture and Victim Protection Act. So meron din silang batas tungkol dyan. Torture and Victim Protection Act, a statute of the United States Congress that is pertinent to this case. That law states that allegations such as these contained in the Hawaii cases are not to be heard by American federal courts if the claimants have available to them adequate remedies under the law of the place where the conduct giving rise to the claim occurred. So wala silang jurisdiction doon sa mga kaso na yon sapagkat meron naman silang available court sa kanilang kung saan nanggaling yung mga torture na yon, doon kailangan litisin, hindi sa Amerika. That is an American law. America violated their own law by taking cognizance of these 4 cases. So na-dismiss, nag-appeal. I already told you kung sinong sumingit diyan sa appeal. Former Ambassador to the Philippines, Michael Armacost, he was the one who made an appeal to the Court of Appeals of Los Angeles 9th Circuit Court. Sabi niya, it is to the best interest of America that we pursue this case because the status of our bases hinges on these cases. So nakita mo, yung sa human rights case at yung din nangyari sa New York tungkol dun sa hidden wealth na yan at yung 4 buildings doon, konektado yan sa interest ng Amerika because of their bases. That is the only interest they have. And they were using those cases to pressure Mrs. Aquino. And Mrs. Aquino also pressuring them to jail the Marcoses. So ganun, talagang nagsabwat. So you have here the violation itself of America, of its own law. Kasi according to its law, kailangan doon sa bansa kung saan nangyari yung human rights violation na yon, doon kailangan litisin. They violated that, tinuloy, because nagkaroon ng intervention yung isang former ambassador dito sa Pilipinas who became, I think, Assistant Secretary for Asia and Pacific Affairs. So sakop niya ang Pilipinas. So yun na nakita ninyo na nangyari dyan. Now, ano pang nangyari at biglang naging 2 billion na yung claim na yan. Pag, nung pasok na sa appeal, sabi ng mga abogado, aba, bakit 4 lang na tao ang magke-claim? So, sabi nila, dagdagan natin. sabihin natin na 10,000 ang tinorture ni Marcos. I don't know where they came up with that number, but they said 10,000 victims of human rights. So that is why the American lawyer, and you check his name, I'm mentioning him to you now because again, it is public record, Robert Swift. And the Philippine lawyer was this Rod Domingo. Okay, both of them decided, yeah, why don't we increase the number? Bakit apat lang? And you must remember, Jose Maria Sison is one of the claimants. And at the time that he was making the claim, the United States National Security Act and their internal security, whatever it is, they passed a provision or whatever document, whatever statement it is, naming the New People's Army, the National Democratic Front of Jose Maria Sison as a terrorist organization. So tandaan ninyo, ngayon nagkakagulo-gulo. They're accusing Parlade of red tagging and so many other people of red tagging. But that was already done by the United States of America itself during the time that Jose Maria Sison was making a claim against the Marcoses. His organization was declared by America, by all of this security, national defense, whatever of America. They declared that the NDF, NPA, and the Communist Party of the Philippines under Jose Maria Sison are terrorist groups. Okay, so anyway, nagkaroon ng appeal, and during the appeal, nagdagdag sila ng 10,000. So anong ginawa? Pumunta si Robert Swift dito sa Pilipinas, naglagay ng lamesa sa Cubao, sa farmer's market or wherever there, kasi alam niya, public market yun, naglagay siya doon ng listahan. Lahat ng mga tinorture ni Marcos, maglista kayo dyan. Then he went to Cebu, did the same thing. Then he went to the Bangkerongan in Davao, which is also the dumping ground of products all over Mindanao in Davao City. Naglagay din siya ng papel doon para maglista, and that was where he was asking people to sign if they were tortured by Marcos during the Marcos time. So 10,000 yung kanilang target. But this took a while. Umaabot na halos ng 1 year kasi extension ng kaso. And so sabi ni Judge Real mismo, remember Judge Real is a Romanian refugee appointed by Reagan. He was also a victim of Ceausescu, kaya galit siya sa mga supposedly dictators. In fact, in open court, sabi nga niya, Marcos is worse than Saddam Hussein. In open court, sinabi yan ni Judge Real. Anyway, so there you have it, that even the judge himself, I am giving a deadline already. You cannot extend and extend. You better submit your names already because I'm making a decision already. Hindi na pwedeng patagalin pa yan. So, they submitted only 3,847 names. Yun ang sinabit sa court, yun ang sinentensyahan ng desisyon ni Judge Real. So, all of these newspaper accounts again, and everybody in media and everybody else talking about it, 10,000 human rights victims, magtatayo pa ng museo tungkol dito and all of that. That is not on record in the court, where there were the claims for $2 billion. Now, they filed that claim in Switzerland. Switzerland, no, we do not entertain human rights violation cases. Kasi kung nasa constitution yan ng Switzerland, otherwise, they will have to pay all of those, how many thousands of Jews that were exterminated during the time of Hitler. So kaya sa kanilang constitution, it's not allowed for any government or any individual at all to claim for the money that is there in Switzerland because they're a victim of human rights violations. So nung nag-file sila Robert Swift doon sa Switzerland, they were denied. So they filed in some of the finance placements in New York, kagaya ng Merrill Lynch, na merong mga placements doon. At nakakuha sila ng several millions, not several millions lang naman. But, pumunta ba yan sa victims? No, of course not. Pinagkati-hatian ng mga abogado. At ang nabigyan, si Jose Maria Sison. I don't know why. I don't know how it happened. But of the 10,000 victims that made their claims, walang nakatanggap nun. When they were getting this from the New York banks and from Merrill Lynch and from other financial institutions where there is money placement at the time. So that is what happened. Now, that claim of 2 billion is there floating. Again, as we've said, if you are to claim, a human rights violation is a criminal case, you will have to prove that in court beyond reasonable doubt. Meaning, sino ba nagkiklaim ngayon? Mga apo, mga anak, mga asawa, mga kamag-anak? Anong nangyari dyan sa kanila that they can claim? Do they have the medical certificates? Do they have the autopsy of all of these people that were tortured or who died? So again, as I've said, you have to be very strict on the claim for human rights violation because precisely it is a criminal case. Kailangan beyond reasonable doubt. So kahit na, and so that's one thing. But did they file here in our country against the Marcoses? Now we have the certification of the Commission of Human Rights which says that in all the years until present, walang kaso pang fina-file sa Commission on Human Rights against the Marcoses for human rights violation. So nasaan yan? Where is all of this coming from? I personally spoke on the phone with Mark Lane. He is supposed to be the leading civil rights lawyer in New York City. We were supposed to request his assistance kasi nagkaroon nga ng appeal ang yung mga human rights claimants doon, naging ilang thousands yun sila with Robert Swift coming up with all those names. So we were supposed to request his assistance regarding the case, but there was Mrs. Marcos could not file what they call this memorandum of reconsideration for the complaint because may bond malaki kasi 2 billion. So even at 10%, she did not have the resources to even file for a reconsideration. So what happened was nakatenga hanggang ngayon yung claim na yan. Hindi pwedeng ma-execute dito because it is the first act of sovereignty is the independence of our court. So naturally, hindi tayo pwedeng kunin yung decision na yan sa Honolulu at i-apply dito. That cannot be done under our law and under international law and even under American law. So when I spoke to Mark Lane, this is what he said. They now filed a class suit. But do you know what a class suit is? So he explained it briefly. Sabi niya, Rita, this is how it should go. If Marcos put in a ship all of these 10,000 people and then he sunk the ship, many of them drowned and they died. Others were just, they just suffered injuries. That is a class suit because of one act and because it happened at one occasion and all of them and by one man. Or he asked all of these 10,000 people to lie down in the street and with the road roller, he ran over them. Some were injured, some died, some had fractures, etc. That is a class suit. When you have a class of individuals under one act and they suffered injuries or death because of that one act, that is a class suit. Yan ang nanggaling kay Mark Lane. Siya yung top civil defense lawyer sa New York City when I was asking his opinion regarding the class suit that was filed. So this is the other issue against the Marcos. Let us be free of this already. Let us declare independence from it. Na wala na sanang maghahalungkat pa ng mga erroneous accusations regarding that. Now, the other item that we have to be free from our Declaration of Independence is what our group, our political party, the Katipunan and Demokratikong Pilipino, have been clamoring for the past so many years. Our independence from the oligarchic control of two of the basic public services for the great number of our people. And what are these? Water and energy. These are public services. They should be handled by the government. It has always been handled by the government all throughout the past administrations prior to Ferdinand Marcos, during the 20 years of Ferdinand Marcos. In fact, he was the one who established the Energy Regulatory Board, etc., to cushion the effects of the rise in prices of the petrol, etc. But what happened? After the term of President Marcos, pumasok na yung privatization nitong basic public services na ito. Private firms took over now, and they are making according to the statistics of RJ Javellana, of Sir Butch Valdez, of Toti Casino, and several others who are part of this, ano ang kanilang billions and billions of pesos every year, ang kanilang kinikita. We have nothing against the rich or the multi-billionaires making money. They can do so with their own industry, with their intelligence, with their wisdom, with their expertise, with their capital. But let them not make money on public services which are harmful to the great number of our people. Basic services should be handled by the government. But because the administrations after Ferdinand Marcos took over all of these private services, you had that EPIRA law, which has privatized these basic services. Well, President Fidel Ramos is responsible for this likewise, and the subsequent presidents after him. Bakit andyan pa yan? This is where we have to declare our independence from the oligarchic rule of these few families. Ilan lang yan? 6 lang na pamilya ang nagko-control ng public service, ng tubig at ng elektrisidad. Wala pa nga dyan yung petrol, wala pa yan dyan yung sa energy sector. Ngayon nagkakagulo na dyan kay Kusi, who is bothered more with what is happening politically rather than arranging what has to be done with our power sector anyway. So that is the declaration of independence that we have to make. Not just today, but every day. Yun ang sinasabi nga dito nila Sir Butch. We declare our freedom from those in government who have lied and continue to lie to the people, promoting confusion and ignorance. We declare our freedom from those in conspiracy with the oligarchy who have imposed the heaviest financial burden and extreme poverty on our population for the past decades. Freedom from all of these policies that promote hunger and death. Freedom from becoming a failed nation. That is the Declaration of Independence we have to claim on June 12. Tapos na yung ating Philippine Revolution laban sa mga Kastila, laban sa mga Amerikano. Wala naman tayong dineclare na independence sa Amerikano. Sila ang nagbigay ng independence sa atin. Ngunit ngayon, sa loob nitong mga nangyayari after 1986, that is where we are suffering the most. Napakabigat ng dala nitong paratang na ito laban sa mga ginagawa nitong mga oligarko na ito. Oligarch because, as we've said, I think I've defined oligarchy so many times already. When you have the control of the finances by a few only for their own benefit and to the detriment of the greater majority of our people. Yan. Kaya ngayon, magkakaroon ng eleksyon, paparada na naman lahat ng mga nais tumakbo dito sa mga oligarko na ito, hihingi ng pera pang suporta sa kanila para yung kanilang staying power in these industries and in these services will continue. That is the Declaration of Independence we have to make. And so, as I've said, these are the two important aspects of what we are discussing today. On June 12th is a commemoration of an independence which we really did not have 133 years ago, but it was just declared by the waving of a flag in Kawit, Cavite, kasi we were under American administration. Our independence came when the Americans gave it to us July 4th, 1946. Pero during the time na nagwi-wave ng flag doon, we were not independent. But whatever it is, we commemorate it kasi yun na nga ang sinabi ni Macapagal, ni President Macapagal, yun daw ang mark ng ating independence at that day. But as I've said, to this day, we are not yet free. We are not yet free from the control of those who are manning the public services that should be taken over by government for the benefit of the Filipino people. We are not yet free from all the accusations that continue to surface every time they accuse the regime of President Marcos of having stolen the money of the people and having violated human rights. So I read to you the court records. I finally found it. Ito po yun, just in case you're wondering saan ang gagaling, dami-daming marka. Ayan yan. The court records, including here, the records from the Central Bank of the Philippines. And then, of course, those from the Court of Appeals of Los Angeles. And of course, I already mentioned many of the provisions of the statements made in the trial in New York. Yung mga yung mga binabanggit ko sa inyo na nanggagaling doon, memoryado ko nan talaga. Because remember, I worked for the defense there, so that all of this is really spilling out of my ears already. But we are receiving a lot of questions, a lot of feedback coming from many people all over the world asking us to explain further ano ba talaga ang nangyari noon, bakit hanggang ngayon yan ang pinag-uusapan. Magkakaroon na naman ng eleksyon sa Mayo. By October, in how many months now? We are now June, July, August, September. In 4 months, sa October, magpa-file na ng certificates of candidacy. Naku, I don't know how we can really siphon out all of those that are undesirable. You know, during the time of President Marcos, his bureaucracy, there was a phrase that he used, the notoriously undesirable. He was dismissing a number of high-ranking officials in the bureaucracy for several cases that they were involved in. And as he was mentioning them, binigyan niya ng title yung mga tao na yun na tinatanggal. Notoriously undesirable. Hindi lang undesirable, notorious pa. I would like to use that phrase again. And please listen to it carefully, so that when you go to the precinct to vote this coming year in May, then think of that and find out if the names correspond to somebody who is notoriously undesirable. Hindi ko na kailangan bigyan ng definition yan or to explain. We have gone through 15 months of a pandemic. All of this preoccupation, occupation on the virus, araw-araw na lang yan ang ating nadidinig. Government is zeroing in every time there is a statement being made on the virus. Ganito ang gagawin sa COVID-19. Kailangan kayo mag-ingat, etc. and all. The economy parang bumubulong lang sa tabi. A national economic program para maintindihan natin, what do? We lost our jobs. Or if we're still holding on to our jobs, hindi tayo makapasok sa araw-araw. So sa isang araw lang tayo nakakapasok, yun lang ang isesweldo sa atin, which is understandable also for the employer. Kasi yan lang ang service na binibigay mo. Alangan naman bayaran ka ng buo. So then what? How can we survive with 1 day salary for the rest of the week? And then you have the agricultural program, which was initiated in the beginning. You had all of the brilliant ideas of Secretary Dar talking about a comprehensive agricultural program. Lahat na yan nasakop. Dumating naman yung swine flu. Dumating naman itong mga several other discussions on whether we should import additional pork, etc. and all of this. But the comprehensive agricultural program, kailangan bigyan ng diin. On a day-to-day basis, government should be talking about this so that it could also be assisting as far as funding is concerned, especially in the rural areas. So you could see that all of this are part of the, not just progress or not development, but just so that we can survive. Also, a national health program. COVID-19 lang talaga ang inaano nila. Sa COVID-19, nagdagdag ng mga susuot ng mask, may gagawing social deal, lahat na yan. Okay, we agree that this is important. Again, the question is, are they scientifically proven na yan lang talaga ang kailangan? So perhaps they could divide more the attention so that we are not in a situation of confusion as far as dealing with this pandemic is concerned. We are grateful that the president has done everything to assure the inflow of vaccines, but then they have to come up with that programming for the second dose of 70 million Filipinos after the first dose. And then they are classifying them mga A3, A4, mga may morbidity, etc. and all. Lahat na lang daw pwede. And that again is at the hands of the local government units that will be able to determine para may disiplina sa pagpasok sa mga vaccination center. What am I trying to say? Let us be free from all of the confusion that is being brought about by too many statements, by too many offices, when you could just simplify. Paano ba tayo kikita sa pandemic na ito? So that is where they could come up with a concentration of dun sa mga nagwo-work at home, sa mga pwedeng itayong mga negosyo, sa mga tulong na maibibigay. I am already lecturing. So let us be independent of ignorance in all of this. But as I've said, our katipunan ng demokratikong Pilipino, matupad lang sana ng ating Pangulo yung pagbabalik ng ating palakad sa tubig at sa elektrisidad, malaking bagay na. Because if you look at your water bills, patong-patong ang mga charges dyan na hindi kailangan andyan. Pati taxes nila, corporate tax tayo nagbabayad. Yung mga systems loss tayo nagbabayad kahit na hindi naman tayo ang naglo-loss ng system na yan. Yung mga project na kailangan isasagawa pa. In future, andyan naman yan, naka-bill na tayo. Yung mga paglilinis ng mga sewerage na trabaho nila, because what was MWSS before? Manila Water and Sewerage System. May sewerage system. Kaya nga nagbabaha, barabarado lahat yung mga kanal. Anyway, so nakapatong sa atin, binabayaran natin. And so too, we have the nuclear plant which could reduce our electric consumption bill by 50%. Bakit hindi na paanda rin? Ang tagal na natin sinisigaw yan. Kung nagawa yan nung simula ng administration ni President Duterte, at sinabi naman niya, paaanda rin. Bakit hindi natupad? Anong ginagawa ni Kusi? Kasi si Kusi nakatali pa dito sa mga may hawak ng ating elektrisidad ngayon. Meron siyang loyalty pa dyan eh. Loyalty to the people, Mr. Kusi, is what's important. It will take about 12, 13, 14 months at the most para paandarin yan. Even Russia is already willing to come in and help refurbish or anong tawag dito? Rev up the engines of the nuclear plant at gagawa pa sila ng nuclear plant din para sa atin. Matulungad lang tayo. Anyway, let us be independent of all of this things that are going around that are not supposed to be going around us, like an albatross hovering for our carcasses. Hindi pa tayo patay, inaabangan na yung ating carcass. Anyway, let's celebrate the 12th of June for whatever it may be worth. But let us consider exactly what we have to be independent from. Okay, so I have 2 minutes to go. Perhaps I should look over now those who have been sending us their messages. Sinira ang bansa, Yoli Hermoso, sabi niya, sinira ang bansa natin. Nadaya at naloko na talaga tayo tuluyan ng mga oligarko, lalo na ang mga Aquino at Cojuangco. Simula pa sa Katipunan, panahon ng Hapon at sa panahon ko, Aquino at Cojuangco ang sumisira. Yes, you know, when you come to think of it, who were the first collaborators during the Japanese time? Mga Aquino rin, oh my goodness. Anyway, so when you speak of this collaboration, na nasira na nga yung ang ating bansa, malungkot talaga, Yoli. Again, we have, ma'am, pa-scroll up po para makita po lahat. I'm sorry, scroll up. Okay, so we have Ernie Ocampo, good evening po. Madam, mabuhay po kayo at mabuhay tayong lahat. Mabuhay ang KDP. Bederio Candido Joselito, magandang araw, Ma'am Rita, watching in Medina. Oh dear, the birthplace of Muhammad, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Assalamualaikum. Vistad Emma, now isang politiko nagsabi na ban sa lahat vaccination, lalo na sa passport, oligarch na lilikuran virus at sa vaccine plano, vaccine hindi doktor, Bill Gates hindi. Okay, you're talking about people who are behind the vaccines. that's another topic which I would leave to our scientists and to our experts kasi ang dami talagang mga question tungkol dyan. Because you must remember, si Bill Gates, ang katutak ng mga vaccination ang ginagawa sa Africa, meron siyang target, bawasan ng population ng mundo. So isa na yan na accusation against him. We have James K.D. Kimbo. So the cases were more like propaganda fuel than anything else. Well, as I have stated it, whether it is propaganda fuel or whatever, those are errors actually that they have done against the Marcoses. John Cyril Onato, good afternoon, Ma'am Rita and people here in KDP. Tama kayo po, Ma'am Rita, siniraan na mga ulupong na oligarko gaya ni si Marcos ngayon ay nakakalungkot isipin, oligarko din ang nagpapahirap sa taong bayan dahil sa kanilang pangungurakot. It's really very sad that they try to do public service as their private business. That should not be the case. Grace Hiroshima, hi Madam Rita, good day. Glenn Resurrection, you're watching. Yes, thank you very much. Yati Badahan Reyes, nonsense. Matagal ng usapin yan. Ang investigahin ninyo ang nangyari ngayon sa mga ospital. Wala lang nagsasalita dahil sa kahirapan, sumasang-ayon na lang ang tao. Yes, a lot of investigations will really have to be done, my dear Yati. And there are other programs also that are talking about this. So you will perhaps understand why I keep on going back to that particular period in our history. As I've said, I could talk about that really personally, professionally, and politically. Beth Ariola, good day po from Qatar. Yes. Romeo Dacalios, good day po, watching from Katbalogan, Samar. Oy, maupay gid. Mabuhay po kayo dyan, Ma'am Rita. God bless. I think you also suffered from the Typhoon Dante that passed through the Eastern Visayas seaboard. We are now, according to Pag-asa, in the period of storms. They call it the rainy season, but this is also the period of storms. Angeline Leasing, good evening, Ma'am Rita. Greeting here from Hong Kong. God bless you po. I have very close relatives who are working there in Hong Kong. Yes, take care and be safe. Zenea Arcilia, good evening, Ma'am Rita. Listening here in Hong Kong. God bless you po. Wala naman silang napatunayan na si Marcos ang nagnakaw. Magawa lang sila ganid na oligarko tulad ni Court. Till now, namumuno pa rin sila. Yes, it is the same name, same. They had some kind of a respite, they say, during the time of Marcos, but it's not true. Sila pa rin yan andon. And besides, they've taken over also many of our sources of energy. Imagine the geothermal. We're number 2 in the world as far as geothermal sources are concerned, na privatized. Some of our dams likewise anyway. So let's pray that our independence from all of these difficulties will finally come to an end. We just have to pray on a daily basis for the pandemic that's still with us, but also pray that we can have good leadership that can save us from all of this mess that we're actually in. Dear God, walk us through this season of the pandemic. Open our hearts, and with your guidance, O Lord, give us the strength to be able to share your guidance with others. Through this time of uncertainty, may we look at each day as a celebration of your greatness. And please make us ready to receive your merciful healing and your love for us and the love that we share for others. For thine is the power, the kingdom, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Thank you for having joined me. This is Rita Gadi, and this has been your hour.